Hello students, I hope everything is well with you. It has been a wonderful time teaching and learning history with you. Let us now begin with a new topic in your 9th standard textbook entitled History of Goa. When we talk about the history of Goa, the first thought that comes to our mind is the Portuguese rule in Goa. The Portuguese came to Goa in 1510. This period in history is known as the Middle Ages. During this time, the Portuguese began the discovery of new lands, new masses, new continents, and new sea routes to the east. Portugal was one of the first countries to begin exploration of new lands. Exploration means they were in search of new places. And the reason why they were in search of new places is because they wanted to have trade with the countries of the East. To have trade means to have business. Since Portugal was very excited about the discovery of new lands, the Portuguese began their voyages to various new countries. Bartholomew Dias's discovery of the Cape of Good Hope was a turning point in the discovery of new lands. In 1498, after Bartholomew Dias, Vasco da Gama reached to Calicut in India via the Cape of Good Hope. This event was a great achievement not only to Portugal and the whole world but also to India. Vasco da Gama's arrival to Calicut led to the discovery of a new route to India, or we can say to the east. The discovery of this new route helped the Portuguese to destroy the Arab monopoly of trade in the east. The Arabs used to trade in spices, precious stones, silk cloth, cotton cloth, perfumes, ivory, and many other articles that were available in the eastern countries. Now, it was not only the Arabs who dominated the Indian Ocean, but it was also the Portuguese who took control over the Indian Ocean. When the Portuguese began coming towards India, this led to the process of Europeanization in India. After the arrival of Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese had a great dream of having a Portuguese empire in the east. For this, they sent Afonso de Albuquerque to the Indian Ocean. When Afonso de Albuquerque arrived in the Indian Ocean in the 16th century, he was invited by Timaya, the admiral of the Vijayanagar fleet. On this invitation, Afonso de Albuquerque decided to conquer the city of Goa. from the Bijapur. He later conquered Malacca and Hormuz. After the conquest of these places, the Portuguese had strategic trading centers in India, which helped them to have a supremacy. Supremacy means a control over the Indian Ocean from Diu to Bengal. In 1543, the Portuguese acquired Bardez and Salsette in Goa. These two places were acquired by the Portuguese because they gave help to Bijapur. At this time, the ruler of Bijapur was Adil Shah of Bijapur. During this time, there was a lot of trading activity happening in Goa. Around 1,000 ships would come to Goa every year, carrying goods from Portugal to Goa and from Goa to Portugal. The money that the Portuguese earned from these trading activities, they spent it to build big structures and beautify the city of Goa. This city of Goa, which is today known as Old Goa, was then the capital of the Portuguese in Goa. Thus, due to this beautification of the city of Goa, it earned the title of Golden Goa. After the Portuguese had conquered Goa, the Catholic missionaries from Europe began coming to Goa, as during those days there was a belief that the people of the place have to follow the religion of their king. Since the Portuguese king was a Catholic, the missionaries came to Goa to spread Christianity. Mass conversion became very common. Churches came up where earlier the temples stood. Towards the end of the 16th century, the Portuguese faced a lot of challenges. The trade with the East began to reduce because now the Dutch had also entered India. With the arrival of the Dutch, the Portuguese lost many of their prized possessions in Malacca, Ceylon, and others. Ceylon is today known as Sri Lanka. The emergence of the Maratha power with Shivaji and his son Sambhaji emerging as rulers was a great threat to the Portuguese in Goa. It was because of the presence of the Mughal army that Sambhaji was not able to enter Goa. The Portuguese were able to recover certain areas in the second half of the 18th century in Goa by defeating the Bhosles of Savantwadi and having other conflicts with other rulers. Soon Goa was able to extend its boundaries to include territories of Bicholim, Satari, Perne, Ponda, Sange, Kepe, and Kanakana, which came to be known as the New Conquest. On the other hand, the city of Goa, Bardez, and Salsette, which were conquered by the Portuguese initially, came to be known as the Old Conquest. Now, let us begin with the Portuguese rule from 1750 to 1850. Portuguese rule from 1750 to 1850. The fall of the Bacén in 1739 signaled the death knell of the Portuguese Empire in the east. This means that when the Portuguese lost the fort in Bacén, that is in Vasai, they came to know that now their downfall in the eastern countries, that is in India and other parts of the eastern world, is coming to an end. But at the same time, it marked the beginning of new developments. The history of the colonials was just taking off. That means at this time, these European powers that had colonized the eastern countries were just coming up, meaning they were getting powerful. At this time, the people of Goa started taking a lot of interest in matters of freeing themselves from these European colonists. The post 1750 period, that means after 1750, the people of Goa witnessed a lot of change. This period provided the people of Goa opportunities for self expression that took the form of revolts and uprisings. There were also a lot of debates in the press, that means people were writing on the newspapers. There were also a lot of experiments on constitutionalism. These changes were forerunners of the events to come in the 20th century. And these events that came up in the 20th century led to Goa's liberation in 1961. The early modern period in history has often been described as the age of enlightenment. It set the ball rolling for the age of revolution. Since around 1750, the Western world was in a grip of liberal ideas, paving the way for momentous changes. So during this time, there were a lot of changes taking place in the world. 13 American colonies had broken free from England. France was in a state of turmoil. Turmoil means in a state of confusion. And this turmoil was due to an intellectual revolution that took place in France because of the philosophies of Rousseau, Voltaire, and others. The Jacobin ideas were spreading far and wide in Europe, and all these changes that were taking place in the world were also heard by the Goans, and they too thought of struggling to get freedom for their motherland. In order to get freedom for Goa, the Goans fought several revolts. We will begin with the Pinto Revolt. This revolt took place in 1787. This revolt aimed at overthrowing the alien government. The alien government means the foreign government. And at this time, the foreign government in Goa was the Portuguese government. It is viewed by some historians as the second anti-colonial revolt in modern times. The first one being the American War of Independence. The plot to stage this revolt, that means the idea to have this revolt, was the mastermind of Father Caetano Francisco Couto and Father José Antonio Gonçalves, who were discontented with the Portuguese policy of racism or racial discrimination. Although both these priests had all the qualification needed, they were denied the post of bishops. Both these priests went to Portugal in 1781 to present their case there before the concerned authorities. But nothing much happened about their case. While they were in Lisbon, they came in contact with José Antonio Pinto from a family from Candolim. They also met Father Caetano Vittorino Faria. He was the father of the renowned Abbe Faria. They returned to Goa disappointed but firm in their stand that the need of the hour was to rise up in arms against the Portuguese rule and free Goa. They were able to get approval for their plans from their relatives, friends, and acquaintances. Acquaintances means all those who know them. They won the support of several officers of the Bardes and Ponda Legion. The conspirators, that is, Father Caetano and Father Antonio, used to have their meetings in the palatial mansion, that means in the palatial house of the Pintos at Candolim, which was later to be known as Palacio de Conspiração, meaning the Palace of Conspiracy. 10th August 1787 was set as the date for the conspiracy. Conspiracy means an attack on the Portuguese. But the said revolt never saw the light of the day. That means they never happened to go through this revolt. On 5th August, 5 days before the deadline, a clerk at the Aldona Comunidad disclosed the plan of the conspirators. So here we understand that this conspiracy did not take place because a clerk who was working at the Aldona Comunidad told someone about the plan of these two priests. At first, the Portuguese governor, Cunha y Menezes, did not attach any importance to this disclosure. But later, the authorities scooped down on the conspirators. Scooped down means they decided to punish them. So they arrested 47 of them and placed them behind bars. Out of the 47, 17 of them were priests and were military officers. The Portuguese conducted a proceeding on these people who were arrested. Out of the 17 priests who were arrested, 3 of them were set free and the others were deported to Portugal. There, they were imprisoned in the fortress of Saint Julien de Barra, where some of them died and some of them were pardoned and were allowed to return to India in 1807. Some of the people who were arrested by the Portuguese were also given a death sentence. One among them was Manuel Caetano Pinto of the Pinto family of Candolim. Before they were hanged, these people were tied to the tail of the horses and dragged through the city. Later, their hands were chopped off and then they were hanged. So, see the brutality of the punishment. Their bodies were then cut and hanged and kept in public places to rot for days together. This was done only to bring about fear in the hearts of the Goans, so that they never again raised their banner of revolt.